I got to work back on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we get started then? Again, this meeting is being held remotely due to the COVID-19. And if everybody could, please identify yourself when making motions or speaking, that would be helpful. Let me ask, first off, is my voice coming through clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's call the meeting to order then. The first item up is introductions and approve agenda. Since we need a roll call for approving the agenda, I have a question. Angie, can we do it this way? Can you just call out the local unit of government on the list, participation list, and then each person can introduce themselves and indicate how you want to vote on approving the agenda. So the first item up is the agenda. Does somebody want to move the approval of the agenda?
Do we need, first of all, to have a roll call of who is here, who's attending?
Do we?
I would.
Yes.
We were going to do
can.
that at the same time we did the motion, but
Yeah, just to facilitate this, I don't want to cross any boundaries here that we shouldn't be crossing, but if we could, it sounds like there's a quorum present. So based on that, as the person presiding today, I would just like to have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. And then as we go through voting on that motion, everybody can identify themselves by way of introduction, and we will have accomplished who's here today. Does that sound okay?
I gotcha. So we are doing introductions and approval of agenda all in one, correct?
Correct.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I will second.
John Pelleggi.
Steve Holland seconds.
Okay.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda.
Okay, then I will go down the list with the organizations and Anoka Soil and Water Conservation District.
Sharon LeMay, Anoka Conservation District, and I approve the agenda.
Okay, Browns Creek Watershed District. It looks like we do not have Craig on yet. I know that he emailed earlier today, so hopefully he will be joining. Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District. I also have not, or I had heard through the grapevine that Wade will be gone today. Chisago County.
Cristobal, Chisago County, present.
All right, Chisago Soil and Water Conservation District.
And Chris, on the motion to adopt the agenda, you vote
Aye.
Okay.
Well, aye. Yeah, Cristobal votes aye.
Okay. Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District.
Steve Schmaltz, and I approve the agenda.
Okay, and then, sorry, Jim, I glossed right over you. Chisago Soil and Water Conservation District.
Jim Burkholz, and I vote aye.
Okay, Isani County.
Susan Morris, and I vote aye.
All right, Isani Soil and Water Conservation District.
Jerry Schaubuck, and I vote aye.
Okay, Middle St. Croix WMO.
John Pelleggi, I vote aye as well.
All right, Pine County.
Steve Holland, and I vote aye.
All right, Pine Soil and Water Conservation District.
Yeah, hi, this is Doug Odegaard, and I vote aye to approve the agenda.
All right, South Washington Watershed District. All right, let's look, we're missing that. Sunrise River JPWMO.
This is Janet Hagelin, and I vote aye.
Okay, Washington County. And Washington Conservation District.
I'm Blake, and I vote aye on the agenda.
Excellent. Okay, so it sounds like
Angie?
we are, yes.
Angie, can you hear
you're
me?
here,
This is
Kristen, yes.
This is Kristen sitting in for our President Wade Johnson.
Excellent.
And Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, and I vote aye.
Excellent. Okay, good. So then we are only missing Browns Creek, South Washington Watershed District, and Washington County. I think we're only missing 3 people then. And like I said, hopefully
Okay.
we'll be getting more.
Thank you. So the motion prevails to adopt the agenda. And we do also note that we do have a quorum present, that the vote proves that. And the next item up is review and approve the June 29th, 2020 meeting minutes. Is there a motion and a second on the minutes? And then we'll discuss.
Susan Morris, I approve. Make the motion.
Is there a second?
Doug Odegaard, I second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, just one minor change here. Let me get back on the screen here.
This is Chris DeVos speaking right now.
I'm sorry, Chris DeVos. There was on page 9, it says help, and it should just be held. Chisago County held their public hearing. It's very small, so sorry. No, hope that's not too nitpicky.
Okay. Cameron, I know that Cameron is on taking minutes. Did you catch that, Cameron?
Yep, I got it.
Okay, great. We'll make
Can
that
we call
change.
that a friendly amendment to the motion makers?
Well, I just have one question. There was a change, I think, in what was discussed at the policy committee on figuring out the costs. Jackie, did that get changed from your letter sent in to Laura? You know?
Yeah, it was
It has
sent in.
been? Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm assuming they're talking about the amended or the corrected one. Is that correct?
They're talking about the minutes from last meeting.
This is Laura. I did not change the minutes at all, Manager Anderson.
This is minutes from the policy committee meeting, not from the steering committee meeting.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The policy committee. There was a change. I forget what page, 2 or 3, I think.
Okay.
When we were talking about, that formula.
Was that during the steering committee or the policy committee? I thought that was during the steering committee meeting.
It was the policy committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you got it. So just out to everybody.
Okay.
Can you bring our attention to where that is in the minutes, please?
I don't have them in front of me, Jim, but maybe Jackie can if she has a copy.
Well, I don't have it out in front of me.
Okay, so it is in the top of page 4. And Manager Anderson suggested inserting the sentence, Jackie Anderson agreed that the equalization process could be done, but it is a more complicated and subjective formula. The Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District uses the actual cost lifespan formula with each project and recommends using the actual cost lifespan method for cost benefit analysis for all Lower St. Croix projects. She encouraged the Lower St. Croix team to consult with a staff engineer for advice before settling on the method to be used.
That's when Dan and I were talking about 2 different ways to do it.
Okay, and I can also real quick share my screen for those of you who are looking at a screen, and then you could see where that is inserted into the minutes. So this would be, well, it's not under a heading, but it would be at the top of page 4.
This discussion is what prompted us to send it to the steering committee.
Okay.
And the way it was worded, Dan and I agreed on the formula, which is formula.
Okay, the question is, do we want to do that statement? What's the group want to do with it? Do you want to have a motion to amend the minutes to include that, or do you want to include it? I don't know. Does that statement, if we put it in the minutes, does that change the does it change the intent of anything in the minutes? It fills out. It sounds to me like it fills out information in the minutes, which is probably doesn't need a separate vote. But I'm going to ask the group for judgment on that. What do you think? Anybody?
I mean, this is Chris DeVos. I mean, that was the discussion. I remember her making that point. And it just reflects that she made that point, and we didn't agree on anything, but she did make that point. So I don't have any problem with it being in the minutes.
Yeah, I don't have a problem either.
Got Susan?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think, I do think we have to make a motion to have it in the minutes, though. Yeah, I don't know.
So no, if both the motioner and the seconder agree that that works just as well parliamentarily.
Correct.
Sure.
Yes.
So, and that's okay with the motion and the second person that we include that?
Yes.
With that, I'll ask for any other changes to the minutes. Hearing none, we will vote on the minutes then. Angie, you want to take the roll?
Sure. Okay. Chris DeBose.
Aye.
Let's see. John Filagi.
Aye.
Doug Odegaard.
Aye.
Jim Burkholz.
Aye.
Kristen Tengi.
Aye.
Steve Schmaltz.
Aye.
Susan Morris.
Aye.
Let's see. Diane Blake.
Hey,
Let's see.
her video, her audio didn't come through. Diane, you have to say it again.
Oh, yep,
There you
I
go.
missed that time. Okay, I remember this being a problem before. Let's see. Jerry Shabak.
Aye.
Let's see. Oh, why did these names rearrange themselves on me? Susan Morris, did I get you yet, Susan?
You already did. Yeah, and it did that to you last time too, where it rearranged.
I know, you would think they would just stay, it's like I scroll down and then they suddenly, move themselves as I'm looking at them.
If I can have 2 votes for every meeting, I'll go for that.
Let's see, Sharon LeMay.
Aye.
Okay, did I miss anyone who is a policy committee member? I don't think I did.
Steve Holland.
You missed me. This is Janet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I did.
Steve Holland.
And you're an aye?
Steve Holland is yes.
All right. And then I missed Janet?
And Janet is an aye.
Okay.
Everybody had a chance to vote?
I think so.
Motion is approved. Thank you. Before we move on, I would like to do one other thing, and that's to thank Cameron Blake for your taking of the minutes. You've done this every meeting. There's a lot of information, a lot of back and forth, and you record it very well. And as the what would I call it? The puppet secretary of this organization, I would just like to thank you for really doing the job. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
So, okay. Yeah, with that, let's, the next item up is to review the steering committee recommendations on cost benefit calculations and addressing landlocked basins, which is a discussion item. We don't have to vote on this. Laura, you're going to take the lead?
Yes, thank you. Well, you'll recall that because of a couple of discussions at your last policy committee meeting, there were 2 items yet to be determined. So the steering committee met on July 16th, and they discussed these last 2 items and have some recommendations for you. I'm going to share my screen. You should have received these as well. It's always difficult to know. There we go. Let's see, there we go. So you should have received this with your meeting materials from Angie last week. The steering committee did take a look at these last 2 items. The first one being how to calculate the cost-benefit analysis. A cost-benefit analysis is a required component of the targeting analysis. But there's a couple of ways you can do it. And there was discussions about the differences and the advantages and disadvantages of using a straight 30-year annualized cost, no matter what the expected life of the project is. So for instance, if you had had a little rain garden project with only a 10-year expected lifespan, you would actually include the cost to completely redo that wetland after 10 years and after 20 years. and annualize that cost out to 30 years. Then you're looking at every project with the same time span. The other way to do it is to annualize the cost based on the expected life of the project. So some projects have an expected life of 10 years, 25 years, 30 years. And so, like I said, both methods have their advantages and disadvantages. But at the end of the day, the committee did recommend to have the projects annualized for the anticipated life of the project based on accepted standards. So that is the committee's recommendation. The other thing I have highlighted right here is that I just want to be clear, because Manager Anderson did have a question about this, that cost benefit analysis is actually to be calculated in two ways based on the amount of watershed-based implementation funds per pound of total phosphorus removed, and on the total project cost per pound of total phosphorus removed. And those two types of calculations weren't a question for the steering committee. That's been in the plan since this whole section was developed, and that wasn't on the table for discussion. But I think to make it more clear that this is an and not one or the other, I may change this language just a little bit to make that more clear. But other than that, that would be the steering committee's recommendation. Are there any questions about that?
Laura, can I just ask you, when you say based on accepted standards, can you elaborate about that?
Well, I think, different projects have different expected lifetimes, and some of the projects, it's a well-known lifetime that's maybe in some sort of a technical document or Bowser document, and then other projects it would be based on professional judgment of the group. So it's definitely not, there's not a list somewhere with all of these projects and all of the expected lifespans for every single possible project out there, but most of them it's a known lifetime.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, it looked like Chris DeBose had his hand up.
So Laura, I was wondering, I agree with the anticipated life of the project, but does having to do the cost benefit analysis both ways, does that create an unreasonable extra workload to figure all that out?
No, I think it's just doing the math a couple of different ways, and there wasn't any kind of consternation from the local staff about having to do it both ways. So
I'll make a motion to, this is Chris DeBose, Chisago County. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the steering committee and adopt the proposed cost benefit analysis.
Okay, the motion's been made to accept the recommendations. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, there is one more recommendation that we need to go through. So I don't know if you want to take those separately or together.
Chris, do you want to hold off on your motion and hear the rest of Laura, or you want to go ahead with your motion?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm okay with hearing both unless there's some objection maybe to the other one. I don't know.
Okay, so your motion is on the table? You cut out a little on me. I'm sorry.
I was just concerned that, having two different recommendations, maybe we should take them one at a time.
Okay. So technically, according to the agenda, we don't need a motion on this, but the motion has been made, and I'm looking for a second.
This is Kristen Tenging. I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the steering committee recommendations on cost benefit calculations. Is there any further discussion?
This is Jackie Anderson. I just thought it was important to add that Bowser made that recommendation to do it two ways.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'm sorry, that was not a Bowser recommendation. That was a staff recommendation. And Bowser requested more information in their comments on the 60-day plan. They requested more information about why both calculations were necessary, and hence we added some information into the text that you just saw and that is in the plan as to why the calculation based on watershed-based implementation funds is necessary. So just want to clear that up.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Angie, you want to take the roll?
Yes, all right. Jerry Shabak.
Yes.
Okay, Janet Hegland.
Aye.
Steve Schmaltz.
Aye.
Chris DeBose.
Aye.
Diane Blake. I think she said aye. It's always so quiet. Susan Morris.
Aye.
John Flaherty.
Aye.
Kristen Tengi.
Aye.
Steve Hallen.
Yes.
Sharon LeMay.
Aye.
And let's see, Doug Odegaard.
Aye.
And Jim Burkholz.
Aye. Did everybody have a chance to vote? Okay, the motion prevails. And on with the discussion. Laura.
Thank you. Yes, that's excellent. Let me find it here.
You're going to have to reshare your screen, Laura, because I
Yep,
turned it
I
off.
got it. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the second item that the steering committee discussed at their meeting. And if you recall, for the 60-day comments, the Valley Branch Watershed District did have many comments on the plan. And one of the ones that stood out was that the plan probably should address, or they requested that the plan address the impacts of landlocked basins on flooded properties and possibly the St. Croix River if those landlocked basins were to be discharged. And after some discussion at the policy committee, the committee decided that the steering committee should take this up and figure out a way to address this issue in the plan. So we would, if the policy committee is in agreement with the steering committee's recommendation, we would change the response to that comment to indicate that while impact to flooded properties around landlocked basins is considered a local issue, the potential impact on the St. Croix River and Lake St. Croix is a watershed-wide issue if and when the landlocked basins with degraded water quality are discharged to the river. Therefore, Table 5.1 Part B under Implementation for Developed and Developing Lands would be revised to include a new implementation action and associated costs. There was quite a discussion, almost an hour's worth of discussion with the policy committee members about this item. And fortunately, John Hansen with Valley Branch Watershed District was on the call and in the meeting. And he and I had worked on drafting some of this to be able to address, at least in part, their issues in Valley Branch and in other watershed districts where landlocked basins are causing problems. But the steering committee did note that even if you're discharging water that meets state standards, you would end up increasing nutrients and other pollutants in the river because it's not going to be crystal clear water no matter what. So, but the group agreed that particularly if watershed-based funds were to be used, that significant analysis would be needed to ensure that all other options for alleviating flood impacts are considered, and that discharging the landlocked basin to the river would be basically a last resort. And that type of project, discharging a basin to a river, would be an extremely big endeavor and require input and permits from multiple agencies, including the Army Corps of Engineers. So, so it wouldn't be just something that would happen, overnight or even within a couple of months. And I think it's really good that this group is recognizing, if you agree with this addition, recognizing this issue, and good to be involved in it. So in just a minute here, we'll take a look at that addition to the implementation table, but that addition would address 3 existing issues and goals that are included in your plan, including water quality in the St. Croix River, water fluctuations in the St. Croix River and the need for additional data, monitoring, modeling, and assessment in the river. So.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Yeah,
Any additional information on that?
Yep, I do have additional information. The actual addition to the implementation plan would be before installing an outlet directing the discharge of a eutrophic natural water body to the St. Croix River, that they would perform analysis and implement measures so that the water body would meet state standards for nutrients. This might be something like an alum treatment or treatment of the water within the conveyance system, something like that. The priority location would be eutrophic natural landlocked basins to be discharged to the St. Croix River, and the measurable output is to perform those analysis and implement measures to meet state standards on 3 water bodies. It's important to note that this is considered a level B priority, which means that it would be eligible for watershed-based funds if the partnership added that during, an annual work plan development. And then it does add costs to the implementation costs. There is a substantial amount of local funding, however, and then also most likely the Corps of Engineers would be paying or could pay 50% of the feasibility studies. So there are some local and external funds available, but at the end of the day, it would increase the total external funds needed by about $375,000 for implementation in developed and developing lands. The steering committee did vote on this. They voted on both of these issues actually, and both votes were unanimous after considerable discussion. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Laura. So on the steering committee recommendation, in spirit with the previous motion, does somebody want to make a motion on accepting the steering committee recommendations on discharging landlocked basins to the St. Croix River?
Gary Schabach, so moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I will second. Steve Schmaltz.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to accept the steering committee recommendations. Is there further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, Angie, you want to call the roll?
Yep. Okay. Jerry, how do you vote on your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Janet Heglin.
Aye.
Krista Bose.
Aye.
Diane Blake.
Aye.
Susan Morris.
Aye.
John Pelagi.
Aye.
Kristen Tengi.
Aye.
Steve Hallen.
Yes.
All right. Steve Schmaltz.
Aye.
Sharon LeMay.
Aye.
Let's see. Doug Odegaard.
Aye.
And Jim Burkholz.
Aye.
It also looks like we now have a 763-360-5563 phone number.
That's just Tiffany. I
Oh,
lost
that's
you for a
you.
sec.
Oh, you were off and you're back again.
Oh,
Okay.
Tiffany's back. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Hearing the vote, then the motion is approved. And thank you. And we're ready to move on to the next item. Okay. Consider approval to submit Lower St. Croix Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan for final approval. That snuck up on us. Okay. First discussion, and then we have a decision to make today. Laura, you want to take the lead?
Yep, I would just note that in your email last week with meeting materials, Angie sent links to that final plan. So the final plan would be, as you saw in those links, with the exception of some additional clarification and clarifying language that we just mentioned regarding how the cost-benefit analysis is being calculated in 2 ways. That's the only change that I'm hearing would need to be made from what you saw last week. And if you vote to approve this, it would go to a 90-day approval process. I believe just the state agencies and Met Council review it one final time. And Dan, Fabian, or Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically Bowser doesn't take that full 90 days to review the plan. And somewhere in the middle there of those 90 days, it would probably go to the Bowser board. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is Dan. You're correct, Laura, on that. It won't, I don't think it'll take the full 90 days. So it'll either go to the September or the October board meeting.
Okay, that's all I have for background on that, Mr. Chair.
Is there any other background? Hearing none, then it would be appropriate at this point to get a motion on the table that we can discuss. Somebody want to make a motion? Is there a motion to approve submitting the Lower St. Croix Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan for final approval to Bowser?
Chris DeBose, I'll make that motion.
John Pelleggi, I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve submitting the plan for final approval. Okay, discussion. We've covered a lot of ground at this point. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Angie, I'll ask you to take the roll.
Okay. Jerry Shabak.
Yes.
Janet Hegland.
Aye.
Diane Blake.
Aye.
Susan Morris.
Aye.
John Pelleggi.
Aye.
Kristen Tengi.
Aye.
Steve Schmaltz.
Aye.
Steve Hallen. Looks like he stepped away for a moment. We'll come back to him. Chris DeBose.
Aye.
A critical moment. Sharon LeMay.
Aye.
Let's see. Doug Odegaard.
Aye.
Jim Burkholz.
Aye.
All right.
Has everybody present voted?
Everybody except for Steve Hallen, who stepped away from the computer. So.
I suppose we don't have any way of getting a hold of Steve if he stepped away for a moment.
Don't know. I can try to real quick look up his phone number.
There you go.
Oh, wait, he's coming back. He's coming back.
I was gonna say, I can text him.
Okay.
Hey,
Sorry.
Steve. We just did a roll call vote to approve the final plan, and everybody so far has voted aye, and we're waiting on you.
I heard that, and I'm sorry, I had to take the call, but anyway, yes. I was listening with one ear to this and one ear to the microphone.
How do you vote, Steve?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So it appears that all present have voted for approval. The motion prevails. That would forward the plan on for final approval. Congratulations, everyone.
Yes. Mr. Chair, this is
Wow.
Laura. Just one more thing. This may be my last policy committee meeting with you, and I wish we were meeting in person. I just want to say that it has been a real pleasure, truly. It's been a challenge. I'm not going to say it wasn't a big challenge, but it was just a real pleasure working with this group, the policy committee members and the staff. It's just such a great group of people, and I am happy to have met everyone and to have worked together. And I know I speak for freshwater staff as well, that overall, this has just been a really great experience for us, and we appreciate your trust in our little companies. And here's to getting the plan through. I wish we could raise a real glass together. But,
Well, thank you for all your hard work, Laura, and your patience with herding cats, so to speak, was this project. So thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
That speaks real good for the group. Yes, thank you, Laura. We will have to celebrate in person when we can, I think. So, okay. Let's look at our next item of business then, which is, well, wait a minute, before we move on from that, I would just like, one of the things I appreciated as a member of the policy committee is the work of the steering committee and all the different staff that step in and out of this process as they need to contribute something. And what I have really appreciated is the reciprocal respect that everybody has shown for each other as they've done work and as they brought forth information and as we work through some pretty tough issues and come up with a plan that everybody could approve today. I would just like to thank everybody that's been involved in this process. This has been a good show of good collaborative leadership that is going to pay dividends in the future. Personally, I have really appreciated the relationships that have been built around this table. I wish we could do a little bit more in-person business too, but I just want to share with you all how much I appreciate what each of you have brought to the discussion. And I have learned a lot through this process and learned a lot from what you are all involved in. And my respect has continued to increase. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the next item, which is review the updated Joint Powers Collaboration Agreement. We can consider today recommending the agreement to the governing bodies of everyone who's participating. That would be by a roll call vote if that's your pleasure. So with that, I'm going to ask Jamie to give us the background. Where are you at, Jamie?
Yeah, so you got in your packet a brand new Joint Powers Collaboration Agreement developed by your team of 5 attorneys, but Jeff Bugie from Chisago County, as you may recall, played a lead role and really just did a great job and put a lot of effort and expertise into it. So really appreciate what he's done. Since the meeting packet has gone out to you, the other attorneys have also received this draft of the agreement. And so far I've heard no comments or edits from them. They're waiting in part to see if this group, policy committee, has any edits and we'll react to that, or you may find that it meets your satisfaction tonight. I did get a few edits from Jackie Anderson, and Jackie's edits were purely typographical. They were clear typographical errors, like words that were repeated one after another. So those 5 or 6 little typos have been corrected. You may find them in your draft, but subsequently you will not. Rather than go farther,
okay.
Maybe you can ask me questions if there are any.
Yeah, let's have a little background discussion before we consider a motion or whatever. Anybody got questions for Jamie?
I just have a quick one. Number 4, Jamie, can you just define number 4 a little bit for me, would you? I'm just having problems with it.
So this is in the memo, correct?
Correct, yes, the memo, I'm sorry. Number
Right.
4 in the memo, correct.
So what that is about whether the policy committee, let me back up, whether the governing bodies could designate a representative to vote on their behalf. So that happened tonight when you each got permission from your governing bodies to vote on approving the plan. That's fine in the planning process. The question that came up once or twice was whether you'd want the freedom to do that in the implementation phase. And the attorney advice is that you would be teetering really close to a joint powers entity if you did that. And so they're not recommending that you do that, but I'm calling out specifically that the agreement says you may not do that going forward.
Okay.
Okay, any other?
Can I just get a, Mr. Chair? This is Steve. Could you run that by me one more time? Because I read that. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding what they're saying. Are you saying that we can't go as a joint powers if we're a joint powers, that we don't have the authority to vote on something without bringing it back to our board?
Yeah, so let me try and put it a little different way. Your role as a policy committee will be to vote, and the outcome of your votes will always be to recommend an outcome or a decision to your governing bodies. And then that recommendation will go to each of your county boards, soil and water boards, watershed boards, and 2/3 of them must approve that decision by resolution. And that's the final decision-making process. This is a policy committee with recommending power, and it's the governing bodies that have the decision-making of power.
Yeah.
If that's still not clear, ask me again, we'll try, or maybe somebody else could give a shot at it too.
Well, this is
Does
Susan
everybody
Morris from my
understand what
standing.
Jane- Go ahead, Susan.
Susan, you
Okay.
try to explain it to me.
Well-
I'm not getting through my thick head.
Well, actually, what we stumbled into is we're trying to do something that really doesn't work. Had I gone to the AMC, Association of Minnesota Counties conference beforehand, before we made this decision, you know, MCIT put together a presentation of what a joint powers, you know, agreement is. This whole idea of collaboration. So technically, we have to go back to our governing body that we come from, present to them what we understand, and get them to tell us how to come back and vote. And I'll just tell you from a practical standpoint, the rest of my board all just kind of looks at me and like, well, Susan, you're the one sitting there. You tell us what to do. Because let's look at it from a realistic point of view. We all sit through, you know, these 2-hour meetings. We learn a lot of information. How can we go back to our boards and tell them in 5 minutes or less what we just accomplished and what they should do? And so I really think we've created something that's not workable. And I would probably lay down on the tracks and just say from the very beginning, we need to have a joint powers authority, not a collaboration. Because basically, you know, the old saying, if it walks like a duck, if it, you know, talks like a duck, you know, it's a duck, right? So we're trying to say that, well, we don't really want to have the joint powers agreement because we don't want to go through all this extra layer of government. We're trying to skirt around it and create this other thing. But in the legal world, we're acting as a joint powers authority, because I would just question, how can we make any motions or seconds or vote on anything, even whether it's, you know, to do with the agenda or any thing in our agenda, if we don't have it all ahead of time, go to our governing body and ask them how to vote. How can we really act in this collaboration mode? I would just say, I think it's impossible, and I think we should just have the joint powers authority and just move on.
Well, that's what I have always thought, but I thought, well, maybe I lost that fight. But I still think we can't operate that way.
Right.
I read this thing again and I'm going, well, this is not right. However we got to this point, I think we have to go back and change it, because we cannot, if we don't trust the people that we are sending as a representative to this board enough to make decisions, then we better get somebody else to take my place. Because I just don't see how we can operate if we can't even, we couldn't do anything without going back to our board.
This is Jim. If I could, we could go back in time a little bit in this discussion. Fran isn't on the call. Is he, Angie?
No.
Okay. I think Fran had brought up from Washington County's perspective that they were, and I'm not trying to put words in Fran's mouth, but they were reluctant to go along with the joint powers agreement. And I think it was because they felt like Washington County was giving up too much authority and had some perhaps bad experiences with some other agreements they were a part of. That I won't say any more because I don't want to put words in Washington County's mouth. And that's why we kind of looked at this joint powers collaborative approach and see if we could make it work. I think that's what brought us to this point, if I recall. Am I accurate in that?
Well, I was thinking the same thing, Jim, that it's unfortunate that Fran is not on this call, because I do remember him saying that he didn't think his fellow commissioners would approve a joint powers authority.
Right.
And I don't know if that's still true or if that has changed at all. I did see that Chris DeBus has his hand up as well for Chisago County.
Yeah, I want to just echo what was already said, and then also, you know, there were several entities, and I know Washington County was probably the biggest one that was pretty adamant not doing a joint powers entity, and that's the core of this discussion, is whether we're collaborative or an entity, and we decided to move forward as a collaborative, and then maybe switch to an entity once everybody gets more comfortable with it. You know, I know Chisago County and, you know, speaking for Jim, Chisago County Soil and Water, we're both in favor of an entity, and we would be in favor of converting it to an entity once everyone was comfortable with it.
Looks like Janet Hegland also has her hand up to speak.
Go ahead.
Janet, you're muted still.
Sorry. Yeah, this is Janet from Sunrise. Chris, you pretty much said everything I was going to say. I worked with Jamie early on in getting an early opinion from the League of Minnesota Cities attorney on a joint powers entity versus a collaborative, and we talked about it at one of our meetings. And my memory serves me correctly, I think there was some real concern about liability, and that was one of the reasons why we as a group decided to move on with a collaborative, which has less liability for the organization, with the option of moving towards an entity after sort of we get some traction on this. So it doesn't mean you can't go back and change our minds, but it was really discussed for quite a while before we made the decision to move on to a collaborative, knowing that it was going to be clunky and hard to get things done.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, a clarification, because I know our county attorney, this is Susan Morris, he specifically said that he felt the joint powers entity would give us much cleaner insulation from any potential lawsuits, and he highly favored that versus a collaborative. The collaborative, technically every entity could be potentially sued in a lawsuit, where when you create a JPA, you are actually creating a legal entity, and if there was ever anybody to sue, they would sue that entity versus every form of government that's sitting at that table.
Yeah, this is Jamie. Susan, yeah, you're right on that. And one thing that the attorneys discussed in drafting this is how to deal with that liability, given what you're talking about. So the law does allow for the collaborative to operate as a single unit, essentially, with one liability limit. And so that's specifically included in the agreement, but it's still not the same as being the entity that you're talking about.
Yeah, so where does this bring us? Because, yeah, it's unfortunate we don't have Washington County's perspective in this discussion today. Because that was
I did just try calling Fran just to see if he would answer, and he didn't.
Next Monday.
Okay.
Hey, this is Maureen Hoffman, staff.
Oh, Maureen, yes.
Hi. So I obviously cannot speak 100% for Fran either, but from when we did discuss it with our county board, it did seem, as Mr. Chair had said, kind of like a deal breaker for our board, that they wanted it to be collaborative, start out that way, with the ability then to look and see how it went, to then change potentially to an entity. So I think Fran would have echoed that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Jamie, I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit, so get mentally prepared for this. With the issues that Susan brought up about the unwieldiness of a joint powers collaborative, if there are enough people that feel that way, at which potential, supposing that we did approve a collaborative, at what point could that be changed into an entity in this process moving forward? You must have thought about this, how it might happen.
Yep, I've got an answer for you. So previously, the policy committee had directed that at 18 months, there be a review and reevaluation. The agreement went a little bit different with attorney opinion. Every year at the creation of the annual plan, there'd be that review of how the agreement is working by the policy committee, and you'd report back to the governing bodies on any change. And Janet, I see you've got your hand up to it. I don't want to just ignore that you're there. But Jim, I hope that helps answer that question.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, was there another question or comment?
Yes, from Janet.
So this is Janet
Go
from
ahead.
Sunrise. I also, to Susan's comment about the liability, I mean, that is correct. When we did speak with the League of Minnesota Cities attorney, there's a limit that lawsuits can go to, and each of us are covered under our respective boards limits. If we go with an entity, that requires that entity to take on its own policy. There was additional expenses associated with that, as well as the requirement for some administrative infrastructure. And I believe that was another reason why we wanted to move forward with a collaborative at first. Just reminding people of the discussion. I actually am more in favor of an entity than a collaborative also, but I'm just remembering why we got here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's totally fair. That's how I remember the conversation too. And I hate that Fran's not here. But I'm wondering, when's our next meeting?
We potentially have a meeting scheduled in August, don't we, Angie?
If we just continue on our same pattern, then yes, then we would be having a meeting on Monday, August 24th.
Presently, I don't think there's any other agenda items.
Yep, that was the
Except
only thing I
perhaps-
was going to say, is that at the moment, if we don't have a reason to meet, we wouldn't be meeting, since there won't be anything left to meet about unless this discussion continues on until next month.
I guess I
Okay.
would just say that I would recommend that we would table this till Fran can be in the meeting, and just knowing that, and here's the hard part too, where we have a lot of smaller entities, and then, there's Washington County. They're honestly the big boys in the room, and they're like, hey, this could be a deal breaker for us. And then everybody's like, eh. And so I think that everybody wants to be inclusive and all that. And I'm just wondering if now there's been enough interaction that Fran would be comfortable going back to his board and saying, hey, I think this just needs to be a joint powers authority. So,
or we just adopt a collaborative, and we can change it to a joint powers agreement later, type of thing. So keep it the same basically as it is, and then after the review process, we could change potentially too.
So
Amy,
then my
have you got
question.
a comment on that?
I would suggest because I mean, we spent a better part of 2 meetings going back and forth about collaborative or entity.
Yep.
I know there was more than just Washington County that was in favor of the collaborative. So I would suggest we continue with the collaborative, and then, see how the first year works, and then, maybe readdress it next year when we do our review.
I agree, Chris. We did spend a lot of time with that. We spent, at least 2 meetings, maybe more, with that discussion. So I think let's maybe keep with what we got.
So if I could summarize the discussion at this point, so we've gotten the background here. We reflected on our previous discussions, how we got to this point, and there is, I hear a significant number of the policy committee members saying that there's some real problems with the collaboration, in that it's unwieldy and may not work, but there's also the acknowledgement that it can be changed as we move forward. So that kind of is what I recall of the process. here we are today. This is an important decision. We could resolve it now, or we could take it up at perhaps an August meeting. What is the pleasure of the group? At this point, I would ask for, does anybody want to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we adopt the Joint Powers Collaboration Agreement. I would make that motion.
I will second that, Chair Shabak.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adopt the Joint Powers Collaboration Agreement. Is there any further discussion on that?
I guess the reason I made the motion too, sorry. I guess the reason I made the motion is because I know going back to my board, they were very adamant about collaborative versus the other way. So they want to do a collaborative. So I know for sure that's the way they want to go.
Okay, we've got raised hands
any other
from,
discussion?
Yep, raised hands from Steve Schmaltz, I saw first, and then Janet Hegland second.
Yes,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to mention the fact that, you know, several weeks ago, we decided to throw in the extra money from the Metro WBIF into the Lower St. Croix. But with the contingency that by January or by December, it looks like we would be able to spend that money. If somehow this slows us down, the JPC slows us down enough to where we can't spend that money, it'll probably be revert back to the Metro for spending, and we'll lose that money.
Right.
Just a thought, just something to consider.
Okay, other comments, discussion?
This is Janet. So my question is, if we did decide to change from a collaborative to an entity, would that require us to amend our plan that we just agreed would be sending out for its 90-day review? Isn't that what's described in our plan, is the collaborative?
Jamie, can you address that?
I'll defer to Laura.
Yeah, this is Laura. I was just looking at your plan language to make sure that all scenarios are covered. And what your plan says right now about the policy committee is that it will establish bylaws to describe the functions and operations of all the committees, and will have the power to modify the bylaws. The policy committee will meet at least quarterly or as needed to review past progress and future planned activities, and shall consider recommendations from the steering committee on budgets, staffing, administration work plans, grant applications, and proposed plan amendments. The policy committee will develop recommendations on these items for consideration by the governing boards of the Lower St. Croix partners, and will carry out the collective will of the governing boards. With support from the governing boards, the policy committee will take appropriate actions, including approval of grant applications and the whole list I just said. So you have had this discussion in the past, and somehow figured out that it would be okay to go back to your boards to get approval to take action on those bigger items like annual work plans and, you know, grant applications and those sorts of things. So that is the language in the plan currently. I think that either way you go with a collaborative or an entity, I think that language would be okay and wouldn't need amending. Anyway, that's my
this is
opinion.
Janet.
Okay.
I disagree. What you just read is the definition of a collaborative, and an entity would allow us to act independent of our governing boards. So the fact that we've said that we would defer back to our boards defines the collaborative. So we would have to change it.
I think that, yeah, Bowser's opinion on that would come into play, but they are not entirely consistent. That's for sure. One of the thoughts I would add to this discussion is that earlier, while there was nervousness about the decision-making process being cumbersome, one of the ways that we talked about making it less cumbersome is to have these annual work plans where essentially all of 1 year's decisions are combined together in this one annual plan, and that's what goes to your governing bodies after you recommend it. It avoids a situation where, in an extreme example, for instance, you need your agenda approved by your governing board. That would be absurd.
Okay, so we have a motion before the group here today to approve the Joint Powers Collaboration Agreement. We've had subsequent discussion that indicates it's tied to the plan, but the plan doesn't specifically mention Joint Powers Collaboration or Joint Powers entity. However, the connection is strong there, I think is how it was described. And Jamie has clarified that we did discuss, and I remember this, the annual work plan as a way to get the whole thing in before the member groups by way of approval. And that is what we had agreed on at a previous meeting, was let's give that a try. So with that, is there any further comments? Otherwise, we will vote on the motion.
So when is the annual work plan going to be reviewed? When would this happen in our calendar year of considering?
You can answer that question.
Yeah, I think I can take a shot at that one. It will revolve around that watershed-based implementation funding calendar. And Bowser staff, correct me, it could be the first half of 2021 that we'd be talking about that, and maybe sooner. Barb or Dan?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Anything else before we vote? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, this is Dan. You're pretty much right there, Jamie. You'll need to have that work plan before we end the implementation agreement in place, before we issue your first round of watershed-based implementation funding, and then it'll be, yeah, whatever that schedule is for the next round. So yeah, I guess annually or every 2 years, I guess.
Okay, it looks like Chris Dubose has had his hand up a couple times now.
Well, we have enough time to develop the annual work plan in order and implement it in order to meet the deadline for the Metro funds being part of the whole watershed spending.
Yeah, I believe it's the intention that we will have and can get that done, but it's going to require action in a matter of months and not longer than that.
Okay, any further comments, discussion? It's been quite a bit of discussion we've had since the motion. Could somebody restate the motion so we know what we're voting on for sure?
Well, I just made a motion
Cameron,
to.
do you have it?
Yeah,
I'm
John made the motion to accept the agreement as it was presented, and then I didn't catch the second. Might have been Janet or Kristen.
I think I was the second, I believe. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Chris.
Okay, is everybody clear with the motion that we're voting on? With that, I would ask Angie to call the roll.
Okay, Jerry Schabach.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Janet Hegland.
Aye.
Diane Blake. Who else says aye? Susan Morris.
I was hoping my rooster would crow instead so you could hear that instead,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, it doesn't do it on cue.
Or a cuckoo clock. Who's got the cuckoo clock?
Right?
Okay, John Falegi.
Aye.
Kristen Tengi.
Aye.
Steve Hallen.
No.
Okay. Chris Dubose.
Aye.
Steve Schmaltz.
Aye.
Sharon LeMay.
Aye.
Let's see, Doug Odegaard.
Aye.
And Jim Burkholz.
Aye. Okay, there being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 ayes and 1 nay. The motion passes.
Can I change my vote to a no? And it just, you guys all understand where I'm coming from. I mean, obviously we're here, we're gonna work with everything, but I don't believe it's the best thing going forward, but so I make that 2 no's.
Okay, we'll revise the vote count to, is that 10 ayes and 2 noes? Okay, you got that?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, Jim?
Well, looks like we'll, pardon?
Can I just say something real quick? I agree with Steve and Susan. You know, I think the entity is the best way to go, but I'm concerned about, you know, we've gone down this road this far and we're running out of time. And so the thing, you know, the reason I voted yes is because I know there's a couple of entities that just weren't going to participate with the entity. And I think it's important to get the plan going, and you know, we can always revise it later. I do agree the entity is the best way to go, but I don't want to stop the whole one watershed, one plan, or slow it down so that we can revise everything and then come back at the next meeting and with the revised language. So, you know, I think it's important to move forward and you know, but at a later date, I would definitely entertain going to an entity.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I would just add that this will be a good test for our organization and for the implementation is if and when it looks like it's time to shift gears to something else, are we able to do that effective in a time-effective manner? That'll be a good test for us moving forward. So keep our eyes and ears open, and let's keep this discussion in mind as we move forward. So thank you all. Angie, is there any further business before the group?
We do not have any further business, only wrap up and adjourn. And
Okay,
as I mentioned before, I do not actually think that we will probably have a reason to meet in August. It sounds like there would not be a reason that this group needs to meet until after Bowser completes its 90-day review. So that's sounding more like, what did Dan say, September or October when Bowser board would meet?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Angie, this is Dan. So how that process will work is once staff is done with the review, so if it would go in September, we would have a Central Region Committee meeting. So that's a committee of the smaller group of the Bowser Large Board that would meet, let's see, probably well, it'd be the end of August or the very first week in September, and the plan then with recommendations gets presented to that board, and then they'll make a recommendation to the overall board that at their September or October board meeting. At that Central Region Committee meeting, we typically have like a presentation by staff and maybe because I think it's the same with the One Watershed, One plans, maybe a representative from the policy committee or two also. I mean, we can talk about that further, but something for you guys to think about. That, and actually, they have been just all virtual meetings of that now too, so it's fairly easy for people to attend. So I just wanted to throw that out there so you kind of know what the timeline is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, anything else?
John Foliggy, I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
And let me ask, is there any objection to the chair adjourning the meeting?
Not at all.
Then I will declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Yep.
My phone call was kind of related to this because we're in the process of buying some land that adjoins us. It's not the smartest move I probably ever made in my life because there's a lot of low ground, a lot of slough, but